Okay, sisters, inshallah, everybody's doing well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the seventh class. Alhamdulillah, we have finished half of the classes that we had planned. I thank you all for participating, for attending. Alhamdulillah, it was good to see a lot of responses to the email I sent. I just wanted to, somehow remind sisters that to try their best to be there to attend, inshallah. But if obviously I recognize sometimes things come up in life. If you are busy one day, something all of a sudden happens, it's okay. It's not a big deal. At that time, I can share the recording. But generally, please do try your best to attend the classes. Okay, as always, feel free to jump in at any time, any questions, any comments. We will, inshallah, go through tayammum again. We had started tayammum last week. In fact, we did the majority of the discussion of tayammum we went through, but seeing as how we didn't finish it, and alhamdulillah, I got a chance to prepare it a bit better, we'll first start off by going through tayammum. And after that, we might take a break if it's already Maghrib time in Toronto. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll start on A'yanun Najisa. Okay, so this will then complete, by finishing tayammum, we will be done the discussion on Tahara min al-Hadath. That's the ritual kind of impurity, the acts like wudu, ghusl, tayammum, to have that kind of purity. And then we will now be focusing from then onwards, we will be focusing on tahara min al khabath. That means the actual kind of things that are najis and going through them, listing them off, understanding them, and then how do we make them, things that become najis, how do we make them tahir? So that will be our discussion then for the next couple of weeks, inshallah. I thought I'd share one point though before we start our discussion about tayammum today. Scholars of akhlaq, they remind us that our goal as a servant of Allah is to achieve something. In the words of the Imams in Arabic, it would be al-ubudiyya al-haqiqiyya. This is actually what Imam Sadiq tells one of his companions, Unwan al-Basri, that we have to seek this ubudiyya haqiqiyya in our life, true servitude to God. Okay, there are high levels that human beings can attain of proximity to Allah. There is a level of witnessing Allah with our heart that inshallah all of us aspire to reach these higher levels of connection to God, of purity, of piety. But the way we got to start, by the first steps we all have to take, are learning the laws, learning the Sharia, and very carefully implementing it in our lives, inshallah. So all of these things, the even the details of like tahara and salah, and as somehow difficult and detailed and at times maybe difficult it might be, it's really important that we give it that importance as part of our obedience to Allah. Of course, there are other things. Obedience to Allah also is manifested in our relationships with our family, in our, I don't know, stances against oppression, and all these other things are there as well. But this is part of Islam. And so, we shouldn't somehow belittle it. And alhamdulillah, it's very, very admirable that all of you sisters are taking the trouble to attend this class. And inshallah, may Allah reward all of you. Okay, as we start again, I would please humbly request all of you guys to turn on your camera. Only two of you, I think, have your camera out of everybody here. Inshallah, we get started with tayammum. Okay, so again, there's about three different discussions we're going to go through that are the main discussions of tayammum. First of all, when do we perform tayammum? What is the time? Tayammum is done instead of wudu, instead of ghusl. The default is if we have water. I don't know about you guys, but I can't even remember, alhamdulillah, I can't remember any time in my life that I had to perform tayammum. I've learned it so many times. Alhamdulillah, I've taught it, but it's never something that I've had to do. So, it's something that we learn. Inshallah, if we ever have to, we should know how to do it. But it's for situations when we are not able to do ghusl or wudu. So, the first discussion is what exactly are those situations? When do we perform it? The second discussion is what is it valid to do tayammum on? Okay, فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. We have in the Holy Quran that do tayammum on Sa'id. Sa'id with a sad. It means earth. And so we'll come to this. The overall kind of understanding is what is earth. And then Maraja have gone into detail that, okay, normal rocks are earth. But sometimes Maraji have different understandings about certain details. If you were to do tayammum on a precious stone, like aqiq, is that considered earth or not? So it kind of goes down to this understanding of what is earth. But we'll go into those details. And then the last one, the last important discussion is exactly how do we perform this tayammum. Okay, so the first discussion about when we do tayammum, Ayatollah Sistani in the Arabic book I was looking at, he lists off seven different categories, seven different times that we have to do tayammum. Okay, the first is basically the idea that we don't have water. Now here there's something interesting that let's say you're in the desert, let's say you're in the wilderness, you don't have water. Do you just simply do tayammum? No, Maraja here have like a number of meters that you have to go and search in a radius around you. Or you have to be confident that in this radius there is no water accessible, no water available. Okay? What is that radius? 220 meters in every direction if you're in rugged, harsh terrain. Okay? الأرض الخزنة. But if it's just normal land that's like easy to walk, flat land, then 440 meters. الأرض السهلة. Okay, so Ayatollah Sistani says this, that in this radius around you, you have to go and look, or you have to send somebody to look, or you have to be confident that in this much area around you, you don't have access to water. Even if it's a little bit further than this, if you are considered in the urf, we talked about what urf is. Urf is very important to understand for ahkam rulings. In the eyes of the urf, if you are considered somebody who has water, let's say it's like 500 meters away and you have a car, and nowadays 500 meters is nothing. With a car, you can go get that water. So you are considered somebody who has access to water in the eyes of the urf. You still need to go get that water. Okay, normally, even if you have to pay for it, even if it's really expensive, you do need to get water and do wudu or do ghusl. But if you don't have it at all, or other situations we're going to come to, this situation, if you don't, if you're not considered somebody who has it in the urf and in this radius around you of 220 meters if it's difficult terrain, or 440 meters if it's easy terrain, if you don't find it, you know it's not there, then you don't need to worry. You can go ahead and perform tayammum. That was the first situation. The second situation is if it's very difficult for you to obtain water. Okay, so let's say you're really old, and even though it's 200 meters away, it's really hard for you to walk 200 meters. Or let's say you have to do something haram, you have to use water that's ghasbi, or in this case it's basically not accessible. It's as if you don't have it. Okay, so that all kind of goes back to the first line over here on the slides. Ayatollah Sistani mentions this as the second scenario. The first one was you don't have it at all. The second one is it's basically there but it's inaccessible. It's not something you can really use. The third one is the idea of water being harmful for you. Darar. And the fourth one, the fourth one is the idea of haraj and mashaqqah. Again, I think I mentioned this to sisters in previous classes that overall the laws of Islam are all going to be lifted in cases of darar or haraj and mashaqqah. If any law of the Sharia is going to harm you, or if it's extremely, extremely difficult, it's intolerable for you to do this, the default is that law is not going to be wajib. There's very rare exceptions like jihad, or standing up for defending Islam. Some situations, okay, it's more important to go through that danger. It's more important to go through that harm. But generally speaking, the laws of Islam are going to be lifted if you are either going to harm yourself or it's going to be intolerable. So let's say you're sick and the only water you have is really, really cold. That cold water is going to make you more sick. It's going to harm you, or it's just going to be really unbearably hard to do wudu with that cold water, and you don't have any option to warm it up. In these situations, you don't need to do wudu or ghusl. The fifth one that Ayatollah Sistani mentions, and then the sixth one, are the idea of how you need to use that water for something else that's more important. That could be drinking. Let's say you, your family, your animals, anybody with you needs that water to drink. Or let's say you need that water to make your clothes or your body tahir. Okay, that making your clothes or your body tahir is more important than doing wudu or ghusl. In these different situations, there's probably other situations as well. Um, Maybe you need to make the masjid tahir. Okay, interesting thing. Like it's wajib. If a masjid, there's a specific definition of what is considered a masjid. Every Husayniya, every Imam Bara, as we call them, are not necessarily masajid. A masjid, if it becomes najis, it is wajib to right away make that masjid tahir. So that's more important that you use your limited water if you don't have a lot of water. It's more important you use it to make the masjid tahir and you do tayammum instead of wudu or ghusl. So these are all different situations where you need to basically use that water for something else. And the last one, the seventh one, is this idea. This is maybe the one that might actually happen to us. So this is why, like in the month of Ramadan, you should keep sand maybe at home. The idea is that either time of prayer or the time of the beginning of fasting is about to enter and you don't have enough time to do wudu or ghusl. So before, let's say somebody is in the state of janaba, they need to do ghusl before the beginning of the fast of the month of Ramadan. Or your Fajr prayers is about to become qada and you either need to do ghusl or wudu. As I mentioned last week, tayammum is very, very quick. It would take you like not even a minute to do tayammum. 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you'll be done. Whereas ghusl normally takes a good, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So when that time is limited, and let me just explain a little bit more detail that's there in the notes that I sent right now. One thing to keep in mind here when it comes to prayer, the time of prayer being limited, you have to have an idea of how long it would take you to do a bare bones prayer. You cut out all the mustahabbat. Don't do qunut. Don't do adhan and iqama. Sami Allahu liman hamida or astaghfirullah rabbi wa atubu ilayh or salawat. These are all mustahab things in prayer. In fact, even the second surah in the first and second rak'ah, the second surah, you have to have an idea. You should try to have an idea how long would it take you to pray without any of the mustahabbat and without even the second surah. And you say it very quickly. Every all of your prayer, you try to do it quickly. If you can do that prayer quick enough without the mustahabbat, without the second surah, and still pray before the qada time, after doing wudu or ghusl, you have to do that. It's only if you're gonna not make it and a little bit of your prayer is gonna fall after the qada time, if you do wudu or ghusl, in this situation, you don't do wudu or ghusl and you have to you have to choose to do tayammum. Not choose, you have to do tayammum. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Obviously, it might be hard to guess this or know this. So if you're not sure, you do tayammum. So if you're thinking, okay, maybe it'll take me 2 minutes, maybe it'll take me 3 minutes to pray, and I just have 3 minutes left before qada, you do tayammum in this case. These are things to kind of think about. I mean, I don't know how many of us actually know how long it takes us to pray, but maybe it's something to try to time ourselves and have a rough estimate of how long it will take us. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, so if inshallah that's clear, that finishes the discussion of when we do tayammum. There are going to be two scenarios that we'll come to at the end of mustahab tayammum, that you can do tayammum, it's mustahab, it's valid to do it, although you don't have to. We'll come to that later. The next discussion is now, what do we do tayammum on? Over here, I told you that whatever is known as earth, okay, when we come to what you can do sujood on, if we continue and we do the ahkam of prayer, one of the discussions that we will have in prayer is what we can put our forehead on for the validity of prayer. Over there, it's not just earth. It's earth and anything that grows out of the earth that is not food and not clothing. That's what we can put our forehead on. Again, earth or anything that grows out of the earth that is not food and not clothing. That's why you can pray on grass. That's why you can pray on wood and it's going to be valid. Okay, you can put your forehead on grass and pray. Over here for tayammum, you can't do tayammum on grass. You can't do tayammum on wood. I put wood here and I crossed it out. Okay? So what you can do is on anything that is considered earth. But now, like I said, this becomes a bit complicated. What exactly is earth? And so there are like a list of things that Maraji have mentioned. One thing that I found there was a difference about was cement. I didn't find anything from Ayatollah Sistani, but I found in Farsi, Ayatollah Khamenei says that you can do tayammum on cement, and Ayatollah Nasr Makarim Shirazi says you cannot do tayammum on cement. So that was interesting. There was a difference of opinion on when it came to cement. If anybody finds what Ayatollah Sistani says, do let me know. On his website, I didn't find it mentioned. Other than that, these things that are there um on the actually yeah, one second. I was gonna wet earth. I was looking at Ayatollah Sistani's book, and I think wet earth you're not supposed to do it on unless you don't have any other option. Okay. So maybe wet earth is something that it seems there may be a difference of opinion on as well. So the second item in the slide here, wet earth, just put a note that that may be something it appears to me that Ayatollah Sistani says you shouldn't do it on that by default. Okay. Other than that, the things that you see on the slide, it seems Maraji agree upon them, that they are examples of earth. So obviously soil or sand or gravel or pebbles or stones, just stones of different types. There's gypsum, limestone, marble. These are all considered stones, and stones are examples of earth. Okay, so if you have like a real stone counter at home in the kitchen, you can just do tayammum on that if it is like marble or one of these real stones. Right? Clay, bricks, these are all examples of things that you can do. Sometimes there's like ihtiyat where they say it's better not to, but better not to. You still can do it on. The default that you should do it on is soil. Okay, in Arabic, what we call turab. In Farsi, what we call khak. That is the default of what you're supposed to do it on. But all of these other things that we just mentioned are okay as well. They are examples of earth. Okay, one thing, like I said, is wet earth, like mud, basically. Ayatollah Sistani says that you shouldn't do it on that unless you have no other option. The Arabic for that is wahl. But it seems that Ayatollah Khamenei doesn't say that. He says you can do it on that. Here's a book that has like a whole bunch of pictures. I don't know if you guys can see these. These are like just examples of different stones and bricks and tiles. And it's saying that all of these things are valid examples of things you can do tayammum on. Okay, so it's actually pretty easy. Like it should be easy to find one of these kind of stones or rocks or sand or something to do tayammum on. That makes sense? Yes, Sister Hannah. Go ahead.
Just a question. So when you say we can do it like on stone or things like that,
Mm,
I know with sand usually like we're able when we do tayammum, like the sand is kind of wiped against on our hands, but with
mhm.
stone, would it be slightly different where there's no like residue? So would it
Yeah,
also that be okay? Or
that's a good question. I was going to mention this in the next point that Ayatollah Sistani says ihtiyat wajib. There should be something that remains on your hands. But because it's ihtiyat wajib, even people who follow Ayatollah Sistani could refer to other maraja who don't say that. And so it's fine. You can just do tayammum on like a smooth stone And even if there's nothing that sticks to your hands, it's fine.
And also, sorry, for this cement where you put the question mark, I didn't hear what you said about cement. Is that like unsure?
Yeah, it's for Ayatollah Khamenei, he allows it. But Ayatollah Sistani, I wasn't able to figure out if he allows it or not. Ayatollah
Okay.
Nasir Makarim Shirazi doesn't allow it. So it's something which it seems there is a difference of opinion about.
And is that an ihtiyati wajib one, or it's that one is just not available? Like we're not sure.
I didn't find
Okay.
anything from Ayatollah Sistani talking about this, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you.
To be honest, all of these things, it may even, I wouldn't be surprised, Sister Hannah, that it goes back to what is earth. Some of these things, it's not really the job of the marja to identify everything for us. It's more like the marja tells us that whatever is considered earth, you go ahead and you can use it. So I wouldn't be surprised if all of these things are, they're examples of the marja explaining things to us. But in such situations, actually, okay, don't maybe like it applies definitely elsewhere. So I'm not saying it applies for sure over here, but there are other situations where when the marja explains something to you, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that fatwa that he gives you and your understanding of that fatwa. Let me explain with an example. If you go look at the ahkam of music, Ayatollah Sistani will give you a general ruling of music that music that is appropriate for gatherings of sin is haram. Maybe at another stage we can talk about this in more detail, but it's something like that. Munasib of majalis of lahu and la'ib. Music that is munasib, appropriate for majalis, gatherings of lahu wa la'ib, meaning sin. Just my internet dropped for a moment. I was just making actually a very important point. So sometimes maraji explain ahkam to us, and that explanation of the marja is not what's called hujjah. Okay, the explanation of the marja, if it gives us confidence, we can follow it, but we don't have to necessarily follow it if we're not convinced by the explanation. I know that sounds very like surprising, but that's the reality. So a good example is music, where the fatwa that Ayatollah Sistani gives us is what is hujjat on us, what is important, what we have to follow. What's the fatwa for music? That music that is appropriate for gatherings of sin is going to be haram music. Now, in the books of Ayatollah Sistani, the office of Ayatollah Sistani, the website of Ayatollah Sistani, they will go into detail sometimes and say that a violin and a piano and these things are haram. But that is an explanation of the fatwa. And if we have concluded that no, sometimes a piano can be used for music that is not appropriate for sin. It's just general okay music that's not necessarily associated with sin. Then listening to that piano or that violin or whatever would be okay. Right, so it's a kind of side point that I don't want to maybe take up too much of your attention on, but it's this idea that what matters is the fatwa and then the explanation beyond it. We can sometimes understand that fatwa ourselves differently from what the marja explains it as. And so maybe over here it's something similar, which where what really matters is just this idea of earth. And whatever is considered earth, we can do tayammum on. But maybe, anyways, at the end of the day, like it's important. It's still very valuable to know what the Maraji are telling us. And so over here, there's all these details of different, gypsum and marble. And in these details, I didn't find anything about cement from Ayatollah Sistani. Okay. Okay, the last point, last important point, although there's maybe one point after that, but the last important point is how exactly do we perform tayammum? Okay, so we went through this last week. Again, I'll just go through it quickly. There's the default way, and then there's an extra thing that's mustahab. The extra thing, some marajit like Ayatollah Khamenei, they say it's ihtiyat wajib to do the extra thing. Again, ihtiyat wajib, so it's okay. You could just do ruju, and this first part over here is all that you really have to do. What is that? That first of all, by default, you strike the earth. whatever you're doing tayammum on. With both your palms, you strike it. And then, like you can see this guy, you put your the palms of your hands, you wipe your forehead and your temples, your jibha and your jabin. So with your thumbs open, you kind of encompass that entire area of your forehead down to your eyebrows. Do your eyebrows have to be included? Some marajis say ihtiyat wajib, some say ihtiyat mustahab. So whatever, it's not a big deal. You would normally just go all the way down to your eyebrows. That part is done. You don't need to wipe your cheeks or anything down into the rest of your face. And then you do your right hand by from the wrist down to your fingertips. So with the palm of your left hand, you wipe the back of your right hand. Palm of your left hand, you wipe the back of your right hand, and then vice versa. With the palm of your right hand, you wipe the back of your left hand. Like wudu, this has a direction. You have to go from top to bottom. Okay, we're going to come to conditions. One of the conditions is that there is a direction and there needs to not be any barrier. You can't have a ring on, for example. But yeah, this is what's wajib. Ayatollah Khamenei and other maraji would say maybe mustahab, if not ihtiyat wajib, that after you're done this, again, once more, you strike the earth and you do your hands a second time. Like I said, it's ihtiyat wajib according to Ayatollah Khamenei, so you could, even people who follow him, could do ruju to, for example, Ayatollah Sistani, who says you don't have to do that. It's mustahab, but you don't have to. Any questions? This was important. This was the way that we performed the tayammum. Some final points, and then we will maybe take a break, or that will wrap up the discussion about tayammum. First of all, niyyah. Okay, so at every stage when you're doing these actions, you have to know what you're doing. Like we said, wudu, ghusl, there's this idea of niyyah in acts of worship in Islam. And what does niyyah mean? It just means that you know what you're doing. Tayammum is always going to be either instead of wudu or instead of ghusl. And so the niyyah that you would have, although Ayatollah Sistani, incidentally, I was reading his book and he says you don't even need to have that niyyah. As long as you're doing it qurbatan ilallah, whatever you needed to do it for, it would suffice. But generally, the idea is that like your niyyah, what you're doing is you're doing tayammum, and that tayammum is either going to be tayammum instead of wudu, or it's going to be tayammum instead of ghusl. It's done exactly the same way, and the conditions of tayammum would always apply regardless of whether it's for tayammum instead of wudu or tayammum instead of ghusl. Don't think that, oh, ghusl doesn't have the condition of muwalat, continuity. We talked about this. So then if I'm doing tayammum instead of ghusl, I don't need to do muwalat. No, that's not the case. Tayammum does have the condition of muwalat, even if it's being done instead of ghusl. Okay? So in terms of conditions, this was there in the notes. It's basically tartib, the order is there. The idea of mualat and tartib is there. And then there's some basic things like wudu. You have to do it yourself if you're able to. Um, taharat and mubah, the khak that you're using, the earth that you're using has to be both tahir and permissible to use. You can't go break into somebody's house and do tayammum on their land when you're not allowed to be there. In terms of being tahir, Ayatollah Sistani has some details where he says, no, even if it's najis, if the najasa is not coming on to you, it's okay. But generally, I think Marajah say both tahara and permissibility is important. These are just general points. The final point is that, interestingly enough, for doing wudu before you sleep, which is really, really recommended, it's in hadith, it's like one of the etiquettes of going to sleep, which has a lot of reward, is to sleep in the state of wudu. And similarly, so that's something that's good to do, right? Similarly, for Salat al-Mayyit, it's something that you don't need to have wudu for. So in both of these situations, Maraja have said, even if you have access to water, you are allowed to do tayammum in this case. Ayatollah Sistani says, raja'an. Other maraji apparently they say non, even not rajan, it's actually something mustahab to do, where you can do tayammum instead of wudu. You can do tayammum even though you have access to water, just for going to sleep or for salat al-mayyit. Okay, sisters, any questions, any comments? That basically wraps up our discussion on tayammum. And now that, like I said, that wraps up our entire discussion on tahara min al hadath. So the whole discussion in fiqh about tahara is divided between tahara from hadath and tahara from khabath. Hadath meaning things like hadath meaning that spiritual state of impurity that by breaking your wudu, by breaking your ghusl, you are in the state of hadath and you do ghusl, tayammum, wudu to go back into tahara. So that now is finished. The remaining discussion that we'll talk about over the next few weeks is the idea of tahara from khabath. Khabath meaning the actual filth, like blood or urine or najasat. What are they? How do we purify ourselves from them? And these things. It's almost Maghrib time, so my plan was in Toronto, where I think all of you sisters are. So my plan was to take a break for like 10, 15 minutes, just allow you to say Maghrib at awwal waqt, and then we return, inshallah. One final point, though, that I forgot to mention, and then I'll take a break, is if you break your wudu, okay, there are some complicated maybe opinions here, but the general understanding that some marajit say, Ayatollah Sistani says this, so inshallah everybody can follow it, is very simple. That let's say you are doing tayammum instead of ghusl, and then something happens, you do a hadath, you break your wudu, for example. That tayammum that you did was for ghusl. So, it's not like you need to do ghusl again. That's taken care of. The ghusl is fine, but now you've broken your wudu, so now you need to do wudu again. Okay, if you're not able to do wudu, now you would need to do tayammum instead of wudu. Well, and so, the same way Ayatollah Sistani generally was very easygoing with ghusl. He said any ghusl suffices for wudu, with the details that we had mentioned earlier. He also is easygoing over here, and he says that if you do tayammum instead of ghusl, you don't need to do wudu anymore. Okay, so it's generally there's this idea that you do tayammum for whatever you needed to do tayammum for. If it was for ghusl, it's also gonna take care of wudu. And then now if you break your wudu, it's just like you've broken your wudu. You have to do wudu again. If you're not able to, you do tayammum instead of wudu. So yeah, other marajit are maybe not as easygoing as Ayatollah Sistani. They would say just the way they say for ghusl as well, a lot of them, that if you do ghusl, I don't know, massam mayyit, you still need to do wudu. So here even they might say that you need to do tayammum instead of ghusl, and then you need to do another tayammum instead of wudu. This is something to keep in mind. Okay, if there's no questions or comments, we'll take a break of 15 minutes. It's right now, I think 6:35 in Toronto, so I will pause the recording and stop talking, and inshallah at 6:50 we will continue. Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Okay, تقبل الله. May Allah accept your prayers. If there's no questions or comments, then sisters, we will get started on the next discussion that I was saying, najasat. A'yanun najisa. Okay, we're gonna start this discussion today and then we'll finish it next week, where we will go through the 10 or 11 different things that in their essence are najis. And in addition to explaining them, we will explain some related ahkam as well. Before we go into this, a couple of terminologies that will be important that we want to clarify. I already explained khabath versus hadath. Okay, this is an important kind of term to know for this whole chapter of fiqh. Up till now, what we were discussing, wudu, ghusl, tayammum, that was tahara from hadath. You break your wudu, you have done a hadath. Now, what we are discussing so far, going forward, sorry, what we're discussing going forward, blood and I don't know, dead bodies and stuff like that, that's all khabath. And how we make those things tahir would be tahara from khabath. Right, so this is important terminology. Another term that's important to know is the idea of aynun najis versus mutanajjis. So these 10, 11 things that we're going to start off discussing are things that are aynun najis. It means that in their essence they're najis. They're never going to become tahir. No matter how much you wash the dog is always going to be najis. Okay, as opposed to that, when something else becomes najis by touching an aynun najis object, that other thing is called mutanajjis. So your carpet, your clothes, your skin can become najis. And that is mutanajjis, and we will discuss later on how to make that tahir. Okay, so important difference between ainun najis, which in its essence is najis, versus something that is mutanajjis. For animals, some of the ahkam right now to do with ainun najasat, ayanun najisa, we're going to divide things based on whether the animal is a halal animal or not. That's one thing. Whether, like, meaning can you eat it or not. The other thing is, does the animal have gushing blood? Okay, this is something important to know. The Arabic is called nafas sa'il. Nafas normally means breath, but somehow over here it's a term that's used for blood, and so like flowing blood, nafas sa'il. In Persian, we would say khune jahandedar. I think that's right, jahandedar. Okay, jihish, it has jihish, it gushes out. If you cut a vein, you cut the neck of the animal, blood will gush out. Ahkam are going to change depending on whether it's an animal that has gushing blood or not. That's another term that's important to know. The last term, and I'm sorry, this is a bit disgusting, is the idea of jalal, an animal that is jalal. What does that mean? That means it is an animal, in Farsi we say najasat khar. It has become accustomed to eating najasa, and according to some maraja, in fact, this is specific to animals that have become accustomed to eating the excrement of human beings. Okay, I don't know how that ever happens. These things are not that relevant for us, but it's something to do with the ahkam. Okay, so this is a term to know that an animal that is jalal. Okay. With that, these are 11 categories of things that are known as a'yanun najisa. Things that in their essence are always going to be najis, with certain details that I'm going to now go through. Okay, so you can see that 11, 10, 11 ones, 11 if you count beer as an additional one to alcohol. You can see them in front of you, and yeah, I'm not going to just read them off. You can see them in front of you. I'm going to slowly start going through them with a bit of detail, and inshallah, we won't finish this today. We'll start it off today, and we will finish it next week. Again, at any time, sisters, if you guys have questions, please do feel free to ask. I'll keep an eye on the chat as well. If anybody has a question or comment they want to put in the chat, please do feel free. Okay. First of all, when we look at number one and two, that's urine and stool. This is urine and stool that is from an animal that is haram to eat and has nafas sa'il, has gushing blood. Okay. Obviously human beings are included. Human beings are haram to eat, obviously. So other animals like a cow, like a sheep, even though they have gushing blood, they are halal to eat. So their urine and stool is not gonna be najis. Similarly, if it's an animal, even if it's a haram animal that we can't eat, but it doesn't have gushing blood, like a snake or a frog or something like that, a reptile, cold-blooded animal, their urine and stool is gonna be tahir. Okay, so that's the first one to keep in mind. Muraja have a difference of opinion when it comes to birds that are haram to eat. Do birds follow the same rule that it depends on whether they're haram to eat or not, or are all birds such that their excrement is tahir? Ayatollah Sistani, I'll double check, but I think Ayatollah Khamenei, definitely Ayatollah Sistani, he says that all birds, their excrement is tahir. So birds are not included in this ruling. The ruling was just for other animals that if they have these two conditions, first of all, they are haram to eat, and second of all, they have gushing blood, then their urine and their stool is going to be najis, excrement, whatever you call it. Um, the next three categories, so that was category number one and category number two. The next three categories, let me just give you the criteria for them, and then we're going to go off into some tangent discussions that are important. So the next three categories of semen, a dead corpse, and blood. These apply to human beings and animals that have gushing blood. Okay, so here, being a halal animal or not doesn't matter. Although when we talk about mita, there is something else there about the idea of tadhkiyah, of slaughtering the animal according to Islam. So that, we'll come to that. But generally, number three, four, and five, semen, mita, dead body, dead corpse, and blood, they are najis for either a human being or any animal that has gushing blood. Okay, so again, what does that mean? That means if you take fish or a reptile, a snake, a frog, something that doesn't have gushing blood, its blood is tahir, its dead body is tahir. I don't know if these animals have semen, but whatever. If it did, it's tahir as well. Okay? Okay. That's that. Now there's a whole bunch, when we talk about mita, there's a whole bunch of side points that are really important. So before we come to dog, pig, alcohol, kafir, which we might not even come to today, I want to pause here and give you a whole bunch of these other ahkam to do with dead animals and dead corpses. First of all, one of the things that is connected to the idea of a dead body is an amputated body part. Okay, so let's say, like, God forbid, a body part of a human being is cut off, that would have the ahkam of a mita. Somebody's finger, somebody's like a chunk of skin even is just cut off, that would be najis as well. Okay? This doesn't apply to like if you're just scratching your skin or you're peeling off a dead part of your lip or you have like a scab or these kind of small things are not going to be najis. But if like a significant part of the body is amputated, then that has the ahkam of mita altogether. Okay, that's one point. Another really important point is that there are parts of a corpse, parts of an animal that do not have life in them. I'll list off a long list of these parts. These are tahir even for a najis animal, aside from dog and pig. Okay, so all these details are kind of important. Inshallah, these details will be in the notes. I haven't prepared the notes for this section, but a lot of these details will be there. So don't worry if you don't write it all down right now. But again, just to repeat, put aside dog and pig, the entire body of the dog and pig is najis. Other than that, if you take like a cow or I don't know, even a rabbit or something else that we don't eat, there are parts in their body that do not have life. Like what? Like their nails, like their teeth, like their fur, hair, hoofs, horns. All these parts are going to be tahir, even if it's a mita. One thing we didn't explain is what does mita mean? Mita is an animal that has not been done tadhkiyah of, that has not been slaughtered according to Islamic laws. Okay, this is another discussion in the future. If we do continue this class, we'll talk about tadhkiyah, how you can slaughter an animal in a halal way. There are certain conditions. There's a normal way that you do tadhkiyah of a domesticated animal, and then there's even hunting rules that you can hunt wild animals, and with certain conditions, when you hunt that animal, it would be tahir. It would be considered mudhakka, tadhkiyah. So an animal that dies that was not done tadhkiyah of, that is what we are calling as mita. Okay? So a cow, for example, if you slaughter it according to Islamic rules, the whole cow is going to be tahir. But if it just dies itself, or it dies in a like a Christian comes and shoots the cow or something, then the body is najis, other than these parts that I just mentioned, parts that do not have life in them, like the nails and the hair, and I don't know, the teeth and stuff like that. Okay. There's a lot more details that I'm going to slowly go through that are important. For a human being that dies after the body somehow becomes cold, it is najis, other than a couple of situations. Okay. Um, okay, my mistake. Sorry. The whole thing about becoming cold is to do with ghusl of mass mayyit. A human being, as soon as they die, even if their body is still warm, they are najis to touch. Okay, like if you touch, God forbid, a family member of yours passes away, you're beside them. As soon as they pass away, if you touch them with like wet hands, your hands are now najis. Okay? When the body cools down, if you touch it at that point, you have to do what's called ghusl of mass mayyit, which we quickly indicated in previous weeks, but the details in our book will come at the end of the book, way at the end of the book, if we get around to continuing this class till we reach the end of the book. Okay, but for human beings, there are a couple of exceptions to do with the najasa. One is that when you've done the ghusl, so there are three ghusls that are wajib to do on a dead body. When the ghusls are done, then that body is now tahir. If you touch the body at that point, even with wet hands, it's no longer najis. Another exception, interesting, is a shaheed. But there is a special definition to shaheed here in fiqh that is not the same as the common usage of the term shaheed. Okay, so commonly we would use the word shaheed for somebody who dies struggling in the path of Islam, somebody who is killed even if they were not a warrior, they were killed for doing something in the service of Islam. They were killed for being on the truth. Today, if a Shia is murdered by some Wahhabis in Pakistan, for example, they may have been just in their car or studying or at home. We would call them shaheed. Rightfully so, we would call them shaheed. But that's not what we're talking about here. Shaheed here means that no, they're in the battlefield. They're fighting on the front lines or in the battlefield somewhere. That shaheed, their body is tahir. Okay? These are the main categories. There's one or two other categories, but these are the main categories of human beings that their body is tahir. Going back to animals, there's a couple of other discussions here that are really important. Um, One of them is the idea of gelatin and rennet. These are really relevant discussions to, food items in the West. Another one that might not be that relevant, that's interesting to know, is called musk. Musk is a type of perfume that is taken from a special kind of deer called the musk deer, Musk, just like Elon Musk. Okay, so musk is something that there's like a pod, it's called, on the bottom of a certain type of deer that human beings like we have a process of somehow doing something such that that pod dies. So like they tie like a rope so tightly that the blood flow while that deer is still alive, the pod is killed off. It doesn't harm the deer apparently. The pod is killed off, and when it dies, then human beings like cut it off. And that pod is very, very valuable. A special kind of perfume is made from it. For like thousands of years, human beings have done this, and that substance is very special. Okay? So that musk is something tahir. Even if you take it from a mita or if you take it from a living animal, normally you cut off a body part of an animal, it's going to be najis. But in this situation, this fa'ratul musk, this musk pod, is an exception where it is tahir. Beyond that, rennet. Okay, let's talk about rennet now. Rennet is also an exception, but there's a problem that the way they make rennet in the West is not something that it would appear is going to be tahir or halal to eat. But generally in Arabic, there is a term called infaha. Let me just You guys don't need to see this table. Let me just open a whiteboard and write these terms out. So when it comes to ahkam of dead animals, there is something called infaha that in the books of fiqh, in the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt, it's an exception that even if you take this infaha from a mita animal, it's going to be halal, it's going to be tahir. Infaha. What is infaha? Infaha is basically rennet. Okay, it's like this idea of in the stomach of a baby goat, I think. Some kind of baby animal that's still like nursing, I think baby goat. There is a substance that you can take out from their stomach that is used to make cheese. Okay, so this is called infaha in Arabic, and I can just read, for example, if you want the definition. In Arabic, it says, الإنفحة وهي ما يتحول إليه اللبن في كرش الحيوان الرضيع كالجدي والسخل. Okay, so baby goats, maybe baby sheep, they have this substance in their stomach. This substance, infaha, is tahir. Even if you take it out from a najis mita animal. Okay, it's like one of these funny ahkam exceptions where you don't ask why it's the case. Like you could extract this substance from a najis stomach of a najis goat, baby goat, and you know that definitely this liquid substance has been touching the najis lining of the stomach. And as you're taking it out from the body of that baby goat, it's touching all the other najis parts of the body. It's okay. You don't worry about that. And when you take it out, that substance itself is going to be tahir. It's just one of these ahkam that's just strange, but it's like that. Where infaha itself, if you are extracting that substance from the stomach of the baby goat, it would be tahir. So, therefore, people may say that, oh, subhanallah, rennet, even if it's taken from an animal by Christians in Canada, it's going to be tahir. That cheese would be tahir. There's a problem. The problem is that the same ahkam books like Ayatollah Sistani's book or other maraji, they say that that's a substance in the stomach. This doesn't apply to the inner lining of the stomach itself. The inner lining of the stomach of that baby goat is going to be najis if it's a mita. Of course, if the goat was killed according to Islamic laws, if you're, talking about a baby goat in a Muslim country, that would be okay if it was killed by Muslims. Or we'll come to other ahkam right now that in a Muslim country you can just assume that all the meat is tahir, is tadkiyah, is halal. Okay, but if it's done in a non-Muslim country, then the lining of the stomach of that baby goat is still najis. It's the substance inside the stomach that is tahir. And now, I encourage all of you guys to do a little bit of research here. It would appear that in Western countries, in Canada, in England, when they make really good quality cheese from the rennet of an animal, they're not, when they use the word rennet, they don't just mean that substance in the stomach. They take the entire stomach of the baby animal and they like put it in a substance and cut it up and extract the rennet from the entire stomach. So because they're using the entire stomach, it would still be najis. And so, long story short, I encourage you guys to do your own research, but it would appear that the really, really good quality cheeses that you're sure are using real animal rennet would be haram to eat in a non-Muslim country. The good news is that this kind of cheese making process nowadays is maybe not that common. And a lot of times, because of financial reasons, they're making cheese from bacteria and, non-animal sources that would be halal. And so generally, if you're not sure about it, you don't need to worry. It's only when you're sure that this is an animal product in a non-Muslim country that you need to then worry about it. Okay, I said a lot. I know we're over our time, but because we took a break, I'll just go for a couple more minutes and then we'll end in like less than 5 minutes, inshallah. Any questions, any comments, sisters? You guys with me? Inshallah, everything makes sense. One last point. Okay, gelatin is really important. Maybe we'll talk about gelatin next week. One last point that I just mentioned that I'll finish with. When we talk about mita and najis animals, okay? Also, a related discussion is about the animal being halal. Okay, there's a difference here. Not everything that's tahir is halal. Everything that's najis is haram, but not everything that's tahir is halal. Like what? Like let's say in a non-Muslim country, you find meat that you're not sure is it halal or haram meat. Is it mita or was it slaughtered according to Islamic laws? It would be tahir for you. Okay, we have this principle in Islam that everything is tahir until you're sure it's najis. So anything you're not sure about, it's tahir for you. But that doesn't mean you can eat it. Okay? So for eating for halal food, as long as you get it from the hand of a Muslim person gives you this meat. You go to the store of a Muslim sells you this meat, or you buy this meat in a Muslim country. In these cases, you don't need to worry. You can just assume it is halal and you can eat it. This is a really important point that if you go to a restaurant that's owned by a Muslim, you don't need to investigate anything further. If it's a Muslim restaurant, you can Bismillah eat the meat. However, if you go to somewhere else, let's say you go to like, I don't know, Longo's or something, just because it says the meat is halal, you can't necessarily eat it. In this situation, you need to have confidence. You need to be sure it's halal. Maybe that sticker of that company, if that gives you confidence, Mulana Rizvi has approved it or something, then you're okay. But if you're not sure, you can't just eat meat. You have to either be sure about it or you have to get it from a Muslim. So this is a very much related and very important discussion. Yes, Sister Masuma?
I had a question about the mita. You mentioned that there's parts of bodies of the animals that are not considered najis. Like I think you mentioned the nails and the hair. Um, where do like bones or skeletons lie in that for animals and for humans as well?
Yeah, yeah. Bones are gonna be an example of that. Tahir. They're a tahir.
Okay, so they would be tahir for both animals and humans. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure for humans as well. Just 1 second. I'll just take a look right now. But yeah, Ayatollah Sistani has this mas'ala 393 of Minhaj al-Salihin. He says that the parts of a mita that do not have life are tahir. And then he goes on to give lots of examples. One of them is bones. Yeah, bones would be tahir. Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Okay, sisters, if there's no other questions, we can end with that, inshallah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. Take care. Fi amanillah.